Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has ordered the country's envoy to UNESCO to submit an official withdrawal from the organisation. Here's how the envoy explained the decision.
UNESCO has broken records of hypocrisy, incitement and lies against Israel and the Jewish people, while polluting its noble core principles with politicization and diplomatic terrorism that sometimes bordered on anti-Semitism.
Okay, let's get the latest from our correspondent in New York. That's Caleb Morpin. Caleb, as I understand, this decision was actually anticipated.
Yes. Now, the UN's cultural agency, UNESCO, has long been criticized by Israel and by the United States for alleged systemic attacks on Israel. We've heard from the spokesperson for the Foreign Ministry of Israel saying that there were attempts to disconnect Jewish history from the land of Israel. Recently, Israel had complained of an anti-Israel bias within the UN. Now, UNESCO had passed resolutions in recent months in which they said that Israel had no right to Jerusalem, and they also said that Israel had no right to the Temple Mount or the Old City of Jerusalem, saying that these were Muslim holy sites. Now, Danny Danon, who was the Israeli ambassador to the UN, he actually specifically commented on this. This is Danny Danon.
No UNESCO declaration, no empty speeches, no General Assembly resolution will ever drive us from Jerusalem.
Now, earlier this year, in October, the United States withdrew from UNESCO, citing similar reasons, accusing it of an anti-Israel bias. And when that happened, the Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, praised this, calling it a courageous and moral decision. And Israeli officials went on to say that UNESCO had degenerated into what they were calling a theater of the absurd. Now, from there, we also heard from Benjamin Netanyahu and other figures. There's been long criticism of UNESCO and its decisions by Israeli and U.S. officials. Now, essentially, the UNESCO, that's the United Nations Educational, Cultural, and Scientific Organization, and it has a number of tasks that it carries out. It protects cultural sites and traditions. It oversees and promotes education for girls. It works to promote media freedom. And now with Israel and the United States withdrawing from it, the protection and the oversight of certain cultural and historical sites is now in question. So it'll be quite interesting to see what results from this decision now that both Israel and the United States have withdrawn from this UN cultural agency, this very important international body.
Caleb Morpin bringing us all the latest there. Many thanks, Caleb. Okay, let's cross live now to Tel Aviv. We can discuss this story with Israeli columnist Amir Oren joins me on the line. Nice to speak to you, Amir. What do you make of Israel's decision then to withdraw?
Well, obviously, every UN agency is a battlefield in the foreign policy and diplomacy arena, and UNESCO is no different than the Human Rights Council and others. But whether or not Israel should withdraw from it is another matter altogether, because just withdrawing, just leaving the field to others is not acceptable to many Israelis, who also don't think that the accent that some Israeli politicians put on the Jewish character of Israel is appropriate. Obviously, Israel was born as the Jewish state. Every Jew in the world is eligible to come over and get an Israeli citizenship. There is no dispute regarding that among Israeli Jews. But whether the minorities, the non-Jewish citizens of Israel, the 1/4 of Israelis who are not Jewish, whether they are treated right or not, this is another subject for debate. So for many secular Jews, what Ambassador Danon and others have been saying do not reflect their own views.
Will this decision not perhaps harm Israel itself, the lack of international cooperation in education, science and the arts?
Yes, of course, it will hurt Israel, because just giving this platform to others, and possibly also losing whatever financial and scientific aid or cultural that Israel could have gotten. Yes, that's another loss, but obviously it also has domestic political repercussions, because Likud, Netanyahu's party, and other right-wing parties want to appeal to Jewish voters of certain political persuasions. They want to tell many voters that the only votes which count are the Jewish votes. And if following the next elections, the only way the center and center-left parties can form a coalition would be to be supported by heavily Arab parties, it would not be legitimate. So it is not as innocent as it sounds, just decrying the UNESCO declarations regarding the Jewish relationship with Jerusalem and other Israeli or Palestinian sites.
Do you think there's a risk now, especially given the recent vote in the General Assembly, that Israel and the US could withdraw from other parts of the UN or from the organization as a whole?
We have been through such cycles of UN bashing. Eventually, Israel and presumably the United States too would come back, having symbolized their displeasure. It is just a gesture. One shouldn't read too much into it.
Okay, many thanks for joining us. My guest this hour is Israeli columnist Amir Oren, live from Tel Aviv. Thank you.
Thank you.